The old you has to die before you get rich. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that you cannot carry your old poverty self into a wealthy life, that one must end before the other can begin. So here is the premise. In the Gospel of John, chapter 12, verse 24, Jesus says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit." Read that again. Unless the seed falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone, just a single seed. But if it dies, it brings forth much fruit. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught this exact law. The old self, like that seed, must fall and die, so the new you, the one who bears a harvest of wealth, can rise. Here is the affirmation. Speak it with me. The old me is gone for good. I am now the one who prospers. My word is my wand. Again, the old me is gone for good. I am now the one who prospers. My word is my wand. Feel that. You are letting the old seed fall and die, so a whole harvest can come. And if you are ready to let the old you die and be reborn, type 2 words in the comments right now. New me. Just type new me. Now let me give you the first key, which is understanding why your outer life is sealed to your identity, because this is the foundation the whole teaching rests on. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that your life is always a reflection of your consciousness, of who you believe yourself to be. Your income, your circumstances, your whole financial world is calibrated to your inner sense of self. And this is why simply wanting more never works. Because as long as your identity stays the same, your results stay the same. A seed of wheat can only ever produce wheat. It cannot produce something of a different nature than itself. And in the same way, an identity rooted in lack can only ever produce a life of lack. It cannot produce wealth, because the outer always brings forth after the nature of the inner. Think of it like a thermostat set to a certain temperature. If you identify as a person who has and earns a certain amount, your life is set to that setting, and any time you rise above it, your own self-image pulls you back down, and any time you fall below it, you scramble back up to it. This is why people who suddenly gain money so often lose it, and why others who lose everything rebuild it. The outer world returns to match the inner setting every time. So the only way to permanently change your life is to change the setting, to change the very seed of who you believe you are. And that means the old identity, the old you, has to fall and die, so a new one, of an entirely different nature, can grow in its place. The second key is learning to see the old you clearly, to identify the seed that must fall. Because you cannot release what you cannot see. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we must become aware of our own beliefs and self-concepts, many of which run silently beneath the surface. So you must look honestly at the old you. Who is this self that has produced your current financial life? What does the old you believe about money? Perhaps that it is scarce, that it is hard to get, that there is never enough. What does the old you believe about yourself? Perhaps that you are not smart enough, not the kind of person who becomes wealthy, that people like you always struggle. How does the old you speak? Of lack, of what you cannot afford, of how tight things are. How does the old you act? From fear, from scarcity, clutching and worrying. This old self, with all its limiting beliefs and fearful habits, is the seed that has produced your current harvest of lack. And to change, you must first see it clearly. You must catch the old you in the act. Notice its familiar thoughts, its habitual words, its automatic reactions. Because only when you can see the old seed clearly can you make the choice to let it fall and die. Awareness is the first step. You shine a light on the old identity. You see exactly who has been running your life, and you realize That is not who I have to keep being. And let me give you a way to actually catch the old you in action. Because these beliefs are slippery, they operate below your awareness. So here is a test. Notice your instant gut reaction when you imagine a large sum of money suddenly becoming yours. Does a part of you light up and think, yes, that is coming? Or does a quiet voice immediately say, that would never happen to someone like me? Things like that do not happen to people like me. That gut reaction is the voice of the old you, the seed of your current identity, speaking. And for most people, it is that second voice, the voice of doubt and unworthiness. Notice too how you speak in ordinary moments. Listen to yourself over a single day. How many times do you say, I cannot afford it, money is tight, I never have enough, things never work out for me? Each of these is the old seed declaring its nature. And notice how you feel when you handle money. Is there ease and confidence? Or is there fear, tightness, a sense of scarcity? Florence Scovel Shinn taught that these habitual thoughts, words and feelings reveal the identity running beneath the surface. So you become a detective of your own old self, watching your reactions, your speech, your feelings around money, and cataloging the beliefs of the old you, not to judge yourself, but to see clearly the seed that has been producing your harvest. Because once you can see the old identity clearly, laid out plainly before you, you gain the power to choose whether to keep being that person, and that choice, that clear seeing followed by a decision, is where all real change begins. The third key is understanding why the old you cannot be improved, but only died. Because this is where most people go wrong. They try to keep the old self and simply add wealth to it. They try to improve the seed rather than let it fall. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this does not work. You cannot pour a wealthy life into an old poverty consciousness. The container itself must change. Think again of the seed. The seed does not become the harvest by being polished, or improved, or added to. It becomes the harvest only by falling into the ground and dying. Its old form must be given up entirely for the new form to emerge. And this is the hard truth most people avoid. They want to become wealthy while remaining exactly the same person they have always been. They want the harvest without the death of the seed. But it cannot happen. The very self that has produced lack cannot be the self that produces wealth. One must end for the other to begin. So you stop trying to improve the old you, to fix it, to patch it up, and you accept the deeper truth, that the old identity must be released entirely, allowed to fall and die, so that something new, of a wholly different nature, can grow. This is not destruction for its own sake. It is the necessary death that precedes all new life. And let me address the resistance you may be feeling right now, because this idea that the old you must actually die, not just improve, can feel frightening, even threatening, and that fear is worth understanding. The truth is that the old identity, however much it has limited you, is familiar, it is comfortable in its own way. It is the self you have known your whole life, and part of you clings to it precisely because it is known. The new self, by contrast, is unknown, and the unknown feels risky. So when I say the old you must die, a part of you may recoil, may want to find a way to keep the old self and just add wealth on top. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that clinging to the old, familiar self is exactly what keeps people trapped in the life they say they want to leave. The seed that refuses to fall, that clings to its hard shell because that shell is familiar and safe, remains forever just a single seed, alone. It never becomes the harvest it was meant to be. Its safety is its prison, and this is the choice before you. You can keep the old identity, familiar and safe and limited, and keep the harvest of lack it produces, Or you can let it fall and die, endure the discomfort of the unknown, and receive a harvest of abundance far beyond what the old self could ever hold. There is no way to have both, no way to keep the old seed and also get the harvest. The seed must be willing to stop being a seed. So you must decide, is the comfort of the familiar old self worth the price of the life you truly want? For those willing to let the old self go, the reward is a whole new life, but it requires the courage to release what is known for what is possible. And let me name the deepest fear that keeps people clinging to the old self, because bringing it into the light robs it of its power. Underneath the resistance is usually a quiet, unspoken fear. Who will I be if I let go of the self I have always known? It can feel as though releasing the old identity means losing yourself entirely, disappearing, and that is a frightening thing to face. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the self you are afraid to lose was never your true self to begin with. It was the false self, the costume, and what you are truly afraid of losing is a prison you have mistaken for your home. The real you, the divine, abundant self, does not disappear when the old identity dies. It is finally revealed. So the fear that says you will lose yourself is exactly backward. You do not lose yourself in this death. You find yourself, the true self that was buried under years of false, limiting beliefs, comes forth at last. So when that deep fear rises, who will I be without the old me? You can answer it with the truth. I will be who I truly am, for the first time, free of the costume of lack that was never really me. And this understanding gives you the courage to release the old self, because you see clearly now that you are not losing anything real. You are shedding something false to reveal something far greater. And I want you to really feel the weight of this teaching, because it runs against everything the world tells you. The world says improve yourself, add skills, work harder, hustle more, become a better version of the same person. And while effort has its place, Florence Scovel Shinn taught that if you do all of that while remaining the same identity underneath, the same seed, with the same deep beliefs about lack, and the same self-image of struggle, you will exhaust yourself and change very little, because you are trying to improve the fruit while leaving the seed untouched, and the fruit can never be different from the seed that produces it. This is why so many people work themselves to the bone for years and never break through. They are pouring endless effort into the outer, while the inner identity, the seed, stays exactly the same. The death of the old you is the one change that changes everything else, because when the seed itself is transformed, the entire harvest transforms with it, naturally, without force. So this is not a teaching about doing more. It is a teaching about becoming new, about letting oneself end so another can begin. The fourth key is the falling, the conscious release of the old self, because this is where the transformation actually happens. Once you can see the old you clearly and understand it must die rather than be improved, you must deliberately let it go. Florence Scovel Shinn taught the power of releasing the old, of consciously dropping the beliefs and self-concepts that no longer serve you. This is the seed falling into the ground, and it is a conscious choice. You decide that the old beliefs about money are no longer yours. You decide that the old fearful, scarce self-image is finished. You consciously release the old story of struggle and lack. In a sense, you let the old you fall into the dark ground. You acknowledge that this version of you brought you as far as it could, and then you let it die. You stop defending its beliefs. You stop repeating its words. You stop acting from its fears. Every time the old identity tries to reassert itself, with a thought of lack, a word of struggle, a familiar fear, you calmly refuse it. That is not me anymore. The old me has fallen and died. This deliberate, Repeated release is the death of the old self. It usually does not happen in a single dramatic moment. It happens through consistent choice, again and again, choosing to let the old seed fall until it finally loosens its grip and dies away. And let me be very clear about what dies and what does not, because this is often misunderstood, and it matters enormously. It is not that you, your soul, your living essence, dies. It is the old identity, the collection of limiting beliefs, fearful habits, and the poverty self-image that dies. The real you, the divine spark within you, does not die at all. In fact, it is set free. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that your true self is magnificent, a child of God with access to infinite supply, and that the old poverty identity was never your true self at all. It was a false self, a costume of limitation built up over years of fear and conditioning that you mistook for who you are. So when the old you dies, you are not losing your real self, you are shedding a false one. You are removing a costume of lack that hid your true, abundant nature. This is the beautiful secret, hidden inside the seemingly frightening idea of death. The seed that dies does not vanish into nothing. Its outer shell dissolves so that the living force inside it, which was always there, can finally express itself as the green shoot and the harvest. In the same way, when your old false self dies, the true, abundant you that was always within is finally released to express itself in your life. So this death, though it can feel like a loss, is actually the greatest liberation. You are not destroying yourself, you are freeing yourself, releasing the false, limited identity so that your true, prosperous, divine nature can at last come forth and bear its harvest. Understanding this takes the fear out of the death. You are not dying, you are being freed. And let me give you a specific practice for the falling, for actually releasing the old self, because it helps to have a concrete way to do it. One powerful method Florence Scovel Shinn taught is the use of the spoken word to declare the release. So you speak it aloud, deliberately. The old me is gone. I release the old beliefs of lack. I let the old fearful self fall away. I am no longer the person who struggles and doubts. And you say this with conviction, as an act of will. Another practice is to catch and release the old self in real time. Throughout your day, every time you notice an old thought of lack, an old fearful reaction, an old word of scarcity about to leave your mouth, you stop, and you consciously release it. That is the old me, and I let it go. And you deliberately choose a different response. Over time, this repeated catching and releasing loosens the grip of the old identity, thought by thought, reaction by reaction, until it falls away. A third practice is a kind of deliberate letting go in a quiet moment, where you sit and you consciously acknowledge the old self. You even thank it, recognizing that it was doing its best to protect you in the only way it knew. And then you release it. You give it permission to die. You say, "Thank you, old me. You brought me this far, and now I let you go." This conscious, even compassionate release is often more powerful than trying to force the old self out with struggle, because you are not fighting the old identity. You are simply, deliberately, letting it fall, like a tree releasing a dead leaf. And however you do it, through the spoken word, through catching and releasing, or through deliberate letting go, the point is the same. You consciously choose, again and again, to release the old self, until the seed has truly fallen into the ground. The fifth key is the ground, the uncomfortable in-between, where the seed lies buried, because there is a stage almost no one warns you about. After the old self dies, there is often a gap, a darkness, a period where the old you is gone, but the new you has not yet visibly emerged. The seed has fallen into the ground, but the green shoot has not yet broken the surface, and this in-between can feel deeply uncomfortable, uncertain, even frightening. You have released the old identity, but you cannot yet see the new life. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this is exactly where most people fail. They panic in the darkness. They cannot bear the uncertainty of the in-between, and so they dig the old seed back up. They resurrect the old identity just to feel familiar again, but in doing so, they abort the very transformation they began. The seed underground looks like nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, in the dark, the most important work is taking place. The old form is dissolving, and the new life is beginning to form. So you must learn to trust the dark ground, to endure the in-between without panicking, to hold steady in the uncertainty, knowing that the apparent nothingness is not failure, it is gestation. The new you is forming beneath the surface, unseen. And if you can simply hold through this stage without digging up the seed, the green shoot will come. And let me give you something to hold on to during this difficult in-between stage, because it is where the whole transformation is won or lost. Understand first that the discomfort you feel in the gap is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is right. It means the old self has genuinely been released, and the new one is genuinely forming. If you felt completely comfortable, it would mean nothing had really changed. The discomfort is the feeling of growth happening beneath the surface. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we must have faith in the unseen, that the substance of things hoped for is real even before it becomes visible. So in this stage, you practice faith in what you cannot yet see. You remind yourself that the seed underground looks like nothing, but is actually becoming everything, and here is a practical way to endure it. You keep your attention on the new self you are becoming, rather than on the frightening emptiness of the gap. When the panic rises, when the voice says nothing is happening, you have lost yourself. Go back to nothing. You gently return your focus to the new identity. You affirm who you are becoming. You speak as the new self. And this keeps you moving forward, through the dark, rather than reaching backward for the old. You also learn to reframe the darkness itself. The ground is not your enemy. It is the womb of your new life. The darkness is not punishment. It is gestation. Everything that is about to be born spends time in the dark first, the seed in the soil. So instead of fearing the in-between, you honor it. You say, I am in the ground now. The old me has died, and the new me is forming. I will not dig up what is growing. I will trust the dark and wait for the shoot. And if you can hold this faith through the uncomfortable gap, without panicking and resurrecting the old self, you will pass through to the other side, where the green shoot breaks the surface and the new life begins to show. Most people quit in the dark, but those who endure it are the ones who are reborn. The sixth key is the rebirth, deliberately putting on the new you, because the seed does not stay in the ground forever. At some point, the green shoot rises, and you must consciously give birth to the new self. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that you can build a new self-image through deliberate choice and repetition. So you decide, who is the new me? What does the new, prosperous you believe about money? That it flows easily, that there is more than enough, that it comes under grace. What does the new you believe about yourself? That you are worthy, capable, a person to whom good things come. How does the new you speak? With confidence, of abundance, of possibility. How does the new you act? From faith, from security, with the calm assurance of one who prospers. You build this new identity in detail, deliberately, deciding exactly who this new self is. This is the green shoot rising from where the old seed died, and it is just as much a conscious act as the release was. You do not wait passively for a new self to appear. You deliberately construct it, choosing the beliefs, the self-image, the way of being of the prosperous person you are becoming. And as you define this new self clearly, it begins to take form and rise. And let me help you build this new self in real detail, because a vague new identity has no power. You must make it specific. So take time to truly design the new, prosperous you. Picture how the new you wakes in the morning, not in dread and worry, but in calm confidence and expectancy. Picture how the new you thinks about money throughout the day, with ease, seeing abundance and possibility where the old you saw only lack and limitation. Picture how the new you speaks, no longer the language of "I cannot afford it" and "money is tight," but the language of "my supply is abundant" and "money comes to me easily." Picture how the new you handles a bill or a challenge, not with panic, but with the calm assurance of one who knows they are always provided for. Picture how the new you carries themselves, their posture, their energy, the quiet confidence of a person who knows abundance is their natural state. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that you build a new consciousness by holding a clear image of the self you choose to be and impressing it through repetition until it becomes real. So you hold this detailed picture of the new you, and you return to it again and again. And here is something important. Do not make the new you a fantasy of someone else, some celebrity or distant figure. Make the new you the true, abundant version of yourself, the self you were always meant to be, beneath the old costume of lack. This is not about becoming someone you are not. It is about becoming who you truly are once the false self is gone. So you define this new self clearly, in vivid detail, and this clear, deliberate image of the new you is the green shoot that rises from the ground where the old seed died. And let me add one more dimension to building the new self, the element of feeling, because a new identity built only in the intellect, as a set of ideas, has little power. It is the feeling that brings it to life. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that it is the feeling that impresses the subconscious and makes the new self real. So as you build and hold the image of the new, prosperous you must also feel what it feels like to be that person. Feel the calm confidence of one who knows they are provided for. Feel the ease and security of the abundant self. Feel the quiet joy of a person to whom good things naturally come. Feel the freedom of no longer being gripped by fear and lack. And here is why this matters so much. Your subconscious mind, which runs your life, does not respond to dry ideas. It responds to feeling. So when you generate the feeling of the new self, you are impressing that new identity deep into the subconscious, where it can actually take root and reshape your outer world. So do not just think about the new you. Feel yourself into the new you. Spend time each day actually feeling what it feels like to already be the prosperous, confident, abundant self. And this felt sense of the new identity is what drives it down into the subconscious and makes it real. The image gives the new self its shape, but the feeling gives it its life. And together, they make the green shoot grow strong and unstoppable. The seventh key is living as the new you now, before the harvest is visible, because deciding who the new you is means nothing unless you actually live as that person. Immediately, Florence Scovel Shinn taught that you must assume the feeling and the identity of the person you wish to become, now, before there is any outer evidence, so you do not wait until the money comes to start being the new you. You begin at once. You think as the new, prosperous you would think. You speak as they would speak. You carry yourself as they would carry themselves. You make decisions as they would make them. You assume the identity of the wealthy self immediately, and by living as the new You feed the green shoot and make it grow. This is the crucial move that most people miss. They wait for the outer world to change before they change themselves. But the law works the other way. You must become the new self first, on the inside, living as that person now. And then the outer world rearranges to match. So you step into the new identity today, not someday. You live from it. You act from it. You speak from it. And by doing so, you make the new self real. And the harvest begins to form. And let me address the resistance that comes up here. The voice that says, "But this feels fake. I am just pretending to be someone I am not. I do not really feel wealthy, and this is the old you fighting to survive." Florence Scovel Shinn understood this objection well. She taught that in the beginning, assuming a new identity can feel like putting on a role that does not yet fit, but that through persistent assumption, the role becomes real and becomes you. Think of it this way. The old you was also, at one point, built through repetition. You were not born believing money is hard, or that you are not the kind of person who prospers. Those beliefs were assumed and repeated day after day until they felt like simply who you are. So when you assume the new identity, you are not creating something false. You are simply choosing, deliberately this time, which self to build through repetition. The feeling of pretending is temporary. It is the natural sensation of a new identity that has not yet fully settled in. And if you persist, living as the new you day after day, that pretending feeling fades, and the new identity becomes as natural and automatic as the old one once was. So when that voice says you are faking it, you answer, "I am becoming," and you keep going, because every single day you live as the new you. That identity grows more real, and the old you grows more distant. And here is a practical anchor. In every decision, ask yourself, what would the new, prosperous me do here? How would they think about this? How would they speak? How would they act? And then do that. Let the new self, not the old, make your choices. And each time you choose as the new you feed the green shoot, and it grows stronger. This is how you live the new identity into reality. Not by waiting to feel different, but by acting as the new self now, and letting the feeling catch up. And let me put this law in the plainest possible terms, because once you truly grasp it, you can never again waste your energy in the wrong place. Everything in your outer life, your bank balance, your income, the opportunities that come to you, the way money behaves in your hands, all of it is an effect. And the cause is your identity, your consciousness, who you believe yourself to be at the deepest level. Most people spend their entire lives frantically trying to change the effects. They chase more income, they try new strategies, they work longer hours, all while leaving the cause completely untouched. And so the effects keep returning to the same level, because the cause has not moved. It is like a person frustrated that their reflection in the mirror keeps frowning and trying to force the reflection to smile by pushing on the glass. It will never work, because the reflection only changes when the person themselves changes. Your outer financial life is the reflection, and your identity is the person standing before the mirror. So all your effort to change the reflection directly is wasted. The only thing that changes the reflection is changing yourself, the one casting it. And this is why the death of the old identity is not just one strategy among many. It is the master key, the one change from which all other changes flow. When you change the cause, the effects must follow. When the seed becomes new, the whole harvest becomes new. So you stop pushing on the mirror. You stop straining to change the effects, and you put all your energy into the one place that actually matters, the transformation of the self that is producing it all. The eighth key is guarding the new life, refusing to resurrect the old you. Because this is the trap that catches so many people right at the edge of their breakthrough. They do the work, they release the old self, they endure the dark ground, they begin building and living as the new one, and then something happens, a setback, a fear, an old familiar trigger, and they resurrect the old you. They slip back into the old beliefs, the old words, the old identity, and their life follows them right back down. Florence Scovel Shinn taught the importance of persistence, of not undoing your good with a return to old patterns. So you must guard the new life against the resurrection of the old self. When hard times come, and they will, the old you will offer to come back. It will whisper its familiar fears, its scarcity, its limitations, and you must refuse to bring it back to life. You hold to the new identity even when it is tested, especially when it is tested. You do not let a difficult moment drag you back into being the old you. You stand firm as the new you, and this steadfast refusal to resurrect the old self is what allows the new identity and the new harvest to fully establish itself. The old seed has died. You do not dig it back up, no matter what. And let me show you exactly how the resurrection of the old self happens, so you can recognize and stop it. Because it is subtle, it rarely announces itself. Instead, it slips in through a moment of stress or fear. A bill you did not expect arrives, and instantly the old you rushes back. The old panic, the old thoughts of lack, the old words of "I cannot handle this." And before you know it, you are being the old self again. Or someone says something discouraging, and the old identity of unworthiness resurfaces. Or you compare yourself to someone doing better, and the old feelings of not being enough come flooding back. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we must guard the mind vigilantly, catching the return of old patterns before they take hold. So you must become watchful, especially in moments of stress and challenge, because those are exactly when the old self tries to return. And here is the key. When the old you comes knocking in a hard moment, you do not have to obey it. You notice it. You recognize it. That is the old me trying to come back. And you consciously choose the new self instead. You deliberately respond as the new. Prosperous you would respond, with calm and faith rather than panic and lack. And every time you do this, every time you refuse to resurrect the old self in a moment of pressure, you strengthen the new identity and weaken the old. The moments of challenge, which used to drag you back down, become instead the very training ground where the new self is forged and proven. So you do not fear the hard moments. You use them, each one an opportunity to refuse the old you and reaffirm the new. And through this vigilant guarding, the new identity becomes unshakable, rooted so deeply that even storms cannot drag the old self back to life. And let me give you a simple daily habit that protects the new identity, because guarding is easier when it is built into a rhythm. Each morning, before the day can hand you a reason to slip back, you deliberately step into the new you. You affirm who you now are, the one who prospers. You set your identity for the day like setting a course, and each night, you review the day honestly but without harshness, noticing the moments you lived as the new self and the moments the old one slipped through. And rather than beating yourself up over the slips, you simply note them and resolve to embody the new identity more fully tomorrow. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that persistence, not perfection, is what wins the demonstration, so you do not expect to never slip. You expect to catch yourself faster each time and to slip less as the new identity takes hold, and there will come a day, if you keep guarding faithfully, when you notice that the old you barely comes around anymore, that thoughts and reactions which once would have dragged you down now hardly touch you, because the new identity has become the dominant one, rooted so deep that the old self can no longer take control. That is the sign the transformation has truly taken hold, when being the new, prosperous you is no longer effortful, but simply automatic, simply who you are. And the old self is a distant memory of someone you used to be. The ninth key is the harvest, the much fruit that the death makes possible. Because here is the promise that makes the whole death worthwhile. Jesus did not say the seed dies and that is the end. He said if it dies, it brings forth much fruit. The death of the old self is not a loss. It is the doorway to a harvest far greater than the old self could ever have produced. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that your true self, freed from the old limitations, has access to abundance beyond what the old identity could imagine. So when you have let the old you die, endured the dark ground, and lived faithfully as the new you, the harvest comes, the outer world reorganizes to match your new inner self. Opportunities appear, supply flows. The wealth that the old poverty self could never hold now comes to the new self that is built to receive it. And this harvest is much fruit, not a little, not barely enough, but abundance, because that single seed that was willing to fall and die has multiplied into a whole harvest. This is the reward on the other side of the death, a life far greater than the one you gave up. So you do not fear the death of the old you. You welcome it, because you understand it is the only path to the much fruit. The seed that clings to its old form remains alone, but the seed that dies brings forth abundance. And let me help you understand the nature of this harvest, because it is greater than most people dare to imagine. Notice the words Jesus used: much fruit, not a little fruit, not just enough fruit to get by, much fruit, abundance, overflow. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this is always the divine intention, not mere survival but abundant life. So the harvest that comes after the death of the old self is not a slightly better version of your old life. It is a life of an entirely different order. The old poverty self, no matter how hard it worked, was capped by its own nature. It could only ever produce a harvest of lack. But the new self, freed from those limitations, can receive a harvest the old self could never have held. Think about that single seed again. One grain of wheat, when it falls and dies, does not produce one other grain. It produces a whole stalk, bearing dozens of grains. It multiplies far beyond itself. And this is the promise of the death. The one small self you were willing to give up multiplies into an abundance far beyond it. This is why the death is never a loss. You give up one seed and receive a whole harvest. You give up the small, limited, familiar self and receive a life of abundance you could not have reached any other way. And here is what makes it even more beautiful. The harvest does not come only in money. Though the money comes, it comes as a whole new experience of life, a new confidence, a new peace, a new freedom. The wealthy self does not just have more money. They have a different quality of being. Calm where the old self was anxious, generous where the old self was fearful, expansive where the old self was contracted. So the harvest of the new self is a transformation of your entire experience of life, not just your bank account. This is the much fruit that the death makes possible, and it is waiting on the other side of your willingness to let the old you go. And let me make this concrete, because it explains so much of what you may have lived through. Have you ever gotten a raise, or a windfall, or a new stream of income, and felt the excitement of it, only to find that within months the money had somehow evaporated, and you were right back where you started? That is the thermostat at work. Your identity was set to a certain level, and your outer circumstances snapped back to match it. Or have you noticed how some people can lose everything, a business, a fortune, and rebuild it all within a few years, while others who suddenly come into money lose it just as fast. The difference is never really the money itself, it is the identity beneath it. The self-made person whose inner identity is wealthy will rebuild after any loss, because their outer world returns to match their inner setting, while the person who gains money, without ever becoming wealthy on the inside, loses it all, because their inner setting was still poverty. This is Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching in Living Action, that consciousness is the only reality, and that your outer conditions are always seeking to match your inner self-image, and the seed makes it vivid. A grain of wheat cannot decide to produce barley. It produces wheat because it is wheat. Its harvest is determined by its nature, and so is yours. Your financial harvest is determined by the nature of the seed of your identity. This is why every attempt to change your outer life while keeping your old inner identity eventually fails. You are trying to grow a different crop from the same seed, and it cannot be done. But here is the liberating side of this law. If you change the seed, if you truly change who you believe yourself to be at the root, then your outer harvest has no choice but to change with it. The same law that kept you stuck becomes the law that sets you free, once you work with it instead of against it. And do not let anyone tell you this abundance is not spiritual, that wanting wealth is somehow wrong. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that lack is never holy, that poverty is not a virtue, and that God intends His children to live in abundance. The harvest of much fruit is not greed. It is the natural, intended result of a self aligned with the infinite source of all supply. So you receive it without guilt, knowing that a prosperous you can do more good, help more people, and live more fully than a struggling one ever could. The death of the old poverty self is not only for your sake, it frees you to become a source of good for everyone around you. Here is the whole picture. The old you that struggles and lacks must fall and die for a new, prosperous you to rise, because your outer life is sealed to your identity. So you must see the old self clearly. Understand it cannot be improved but only died. Consciously release it. Endure the dark in between without digging it up. Deliberately put on the new you. Live as that new self now before the evidence. Refuse to resurrect the old one, and receive the harvest of much fruit that the death makes possible. When you do this, you stop trying to change your life while remaining the same person, and you change at the very root. You become a new seed, and a new harvest grows. Every part of this is available to you starting tonight. And before we close, let me be direct with you for a moment, because you now understand the whole journey, the death, the dark ground, the rebirth, and the harvest. But understanding it and walking it are two different things. And the truth is that this is the hardest work there is, letting the old self die and holding the new one through the uncertain in between. And most people cannot sustain it alone. The old identity has years of momentum, and it will pull you back again and again, especially in the dark stretches. This is exactly why I created the Overflow Covenant, a 21-day sequence where one short decree, built to help you release the old self and establish the new one, lands in your inbox every single morning, to walk with you through the death and the rebirth, day after day, until the new identity is firmly rooted and the harvest begins. It is $27, one payment, 30-day full refund. The link is right there in the description. Begin it tonight, and let the first decree reach you in the morning. And let me remind you why this whole difficult journey is worth every bit of the effort. Because in a world obsessed with quick fixes and surface changes, Florence Scovel Shinn pointed to something far deeper and far more powerful. That you are not stuck with the life your old self has produced, that you have the power to become someone new entirely. and that from that new self, an entirely new life naturally grows. This is the most hopeful truth there is, that no matter how limited your old identity has been, no matter what harvest of lack it has produced, you are not condemned to it. You can let that old seed fall and die, and become a new seed, and grow a new harvest. And the people whose lives seem to transform dramatically did not usually find some external trick. They underwent this inner death and rebirth. They became new, and their outer world followed. And that same power is available to you, right now, tonight. So speak the affirmation with me one final time before you go. The old me is gone for good. I am now the one who prospers. My word is my wand. Hold that. And from this moment on, stop trying to improve the old you. Let it fall and die. So the new you, the one who was always meant to bear a harvest of wealth, can finally rise.